Imagine, the end of the world has arrived. The cities are in ruins, the streets are overrun with hordes of the undead, and humanity is on the brink of extinction. Amid this chaos, one man's unyielding optimism becomes a beacon of hope for those fighting to survive. Hey everyone, welcome back to Moxie Games, and welcome back to another look into the character files of Left 4 Dead 2. Today let's dive into Lewis's character info. We'll cover what's available to us throughout the decades of this game's release. Let's get started. Thanks for Mox for allowing me to read the new script, The True King, the King of War. Left 4 Dead is a video game that has gone down in history as one of the most important for popular culture. Since we're talking about the sequel, which has taken it even further, today we're going to talk about Left 4 Dead and one specific character, Lewis. Armed with nothing but a submachine gun and an indomitable spirit, Lewis stands out for his infectious optimism in a world darkened by despair. As cities crumble and hope fades, Lewis's relentless positivity and strategic mind make him not just a survivor, but a leader. We know how the world of Left 4 Dead works, and even more so when we reach Left 4 Dead 2. We are talking about a character who would accompany the rest of his equally iconic teammates from Zoe to Bill. They've been called the face of the Valve franchise, but what brings us to the forefront today is to know deeply, who is Lewis from Left 4 Dead 2? Meet Lewis, a key character in the pulse-pounding world of Left 4 Dead. With a backstory as rich as his survival skills, Lewis was not just any corporate drone. Prior to the apocalyptic events that shook his world, he was a dedicated junior systems analyst at Franklin Brothers, nestled in the bustling IT hub of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Lewis was always a bit peculiar about the environment of his office, the Franklin Brothers. He wasn't used to interacting so much with his office mates. While they were busy with spreadsheets and meetings, he found solace in the controlled chaos of the gun range. Lunch breaks were his favorite time, moments of respite from the monotony of corporate life. So it's safe to say that he was already well versed with guns, though it was a subject of some ridicule, as one could understand why someone would trade a sandwich for a firearm. And that wasn't even his real hobby. It was something to relax, because his real hobby was video games and collectibles. From a heavy figurine sitting on his desk to generally spending his time playing Counter-Strike in cooperative mode. How strange. He also spent time playing Half-Life, oddly a Valve game whose characters only play Valve games, but it was his way of distracting himself and escaping from the exhausting work routine and the ridicule for one of his hobbies. Then came the infection. The green flu, which, as we know, is perhaps one of the deadliest diseases in fiction and one of the most dangerous zombie viruses. It's an unknown pathological disease that transforms the infected into almost unrecognizable beings, endowing them with a homicidal ferocity that makes them extremely dangerous, turning them into zombies. The mortality rate is extremely high. Most infected people succumb to the disease within days, if not hours, of initial exposure, and their infection spreads immediately. The only people who survive are those who are relatively immune, or carriers. Before the chaos, Lewis's life was marked by the quiet hum of computers and the occasional clack of keyboards. During his lunch breaks, Lewis had an unusual hobby that set him apart from his colleagues. He frequented the local shooting range. While his coworkers scoffed at his pastime, Lewis honed his marksmanship, a skill that would later prove invaluable. His desk, cluttered with tech gear and a notable figurine of the Heavy from Team Fortress 2, hinted at his passion for video games. He often dropped references to Counter-Strike and Half-Life, and lamented the absence of an Xbox during a tense moment on the island in the Keys. But everything changed 2 days after the infection hit. It was just another ordinary day until Lewis stepped into the men's restroom during a debate over the media's frenzy about the virus. There, he faced his first infected. The encounter was brutal but eye-opening, forcing Lewis to step outside of the restroom into a nightmarish reality. His office was destroyed, his colleagues were dead, and the world outside was crumbling. Amidst the chaos, Lewis's educational background, boasting an undergraduate degree, an MBA, and a stint in Tokyo where he learned Japanese, speaks volumes about his intellect and adaptability.
What the hell does this mean?
Taki, I love you. Goodbye.
These traits made him the most educated and arguably the most resourceful of the survivors. On the other hand, Lewis had always been a skeptic, so he dismissed all the warnings from people and the collective panic about infected people at his workplace. At first, it didn't seem like anything zombie-like or anything, just a simple illness, but it wasn't until he saw it with his own eyes, that rotting silhouette, that stench of decay mixed with the metallic taste of blood, that he had to face it as he fought to survive. After the fight, he went out into the street to witness a scene of devastation. Papers fluttered like confetti as people ran. The disease had destroyed everything in a very short time. Now his old colleagues lay in silence, their bodies mere shells in the aftermath of a cruel end. The windows shattered, and then came the screams from outside. He managed to survive with some prior knowledge he had acquired, apart from his ability to shoot, not to mention that he was also a carrier, not infected but carrying the virus to tell the tale, which made him a survivor. Not to mention that he became a vital person to society and its survival thanks to his vast knowledge, which made him quite relevant to the world. This was due to certain travels he made during his student days, where he even traveled through Japan to study various things that would greatly improve some important things. As the sun set over the ruins of civilization, Lewis embarked on a journey full of danger and uncertainty, armed not only with a weapon, but also with the wisdom of his many experiences. He ventured forth, a determined survivor making his own way in a world gone mad. After the events that occurred in his previous job as a junior systems analyst in Pennsylvania, he was left to fend for himself and fight for his own survival. As we know, Left 4 Dead doesn't have a story that we can follow in the gameplay itself, so it's not easy to understand the continuity, despite the demands of having a story mode. But what can be known is that after the outbreak, it was when our dear character decided to take a machine gun, or double pistols, so characteristic of him. Thanks to his experience with weapons, it can be said that he's at least very capable of providing various assists and is accurate, just like the rest of his teammates, which we will talk about a little later. Among his teammates, he is considered to be a rather pleasant person. Not only does he transmit the disease, but he also spreads great optimism and a rather pleasant personality, which helps in every situation as he generally maintains great composure. But someone who is the dream of every geek, someone who has that history of few friends, a person who has little or no opportunity to interact, and who, in fact, constantly received ridicule from his colleagues. So this leads us to the dilemma that he hides his personality, his problems, and complexities very well, that he may be a time bomb that was going to explode out of anger at some point, but that can be talked about a little bit later as it's not too relevant now. We can understand a little bit about him by analyzing the way he interacts with the rest of his team. As we said, he is someone who keeps the team's spirits up with a positive and pleasant attitude, so we can start with characters like Bill, where we can show a concept of admiration. Especially in these cases, we can see how Lewis shows respect and concern, especially when Bill is injured. We could say that this is what he is trying to be without realizing what kind of person he is, which leads us to another character. He and Zoe really get along. We could say that this is a friendship in which they mostly joke and act in a pleasant and fun way, a way to distract themselves, something different from the problems he had in the past. Apart from this affection, they both help each other too much in tense moments. Not like what happens with Francis, with whom he has more problems, although I will get to that later. Both are quite a contrast, what we would call mirrors of each other, and in this way they do not get along very well because they're both the opposite in terms of behavior. Lewis has an optimistic personality, while Francis has a rather heavy character, where there is a great contrast. Just like Nick, with whom they always have problems because, while Francis is quite dark and reserved, Nick is quite derogatory and sometimes even a bit negative, and he's the only survivor who does not receive a good luck wish at the end of his missions, which can be considered a bit unlucky. Then there are characters like Coach and Ellis, who together form a united team that tries to keep hope alive in a world full of despair. It sounds pretty poetic, but that's the way that they're written. It is curious because they manage to create a quite balanced and quite comfortable contrast between them. Still, as a character, Lewis always tries to help them all equally, even if they don't get along. This leads us to an analysis that would be interesting to explore. Lewis's journey didn't end there. He reappears in Left 4 Dead 2 during the campaign The Passing, where he and his fellow survivors, Zoe and Francis, cross paths with the new lineup of survivors. His resilience is further tested in The Sacrifice comic. There, a terrifying encounter with a witch leaves him with a damaged left leg, confining him to manning a heavy machine gun during the campaign's gripping finale. Moreover, a bite from an infected leaves his fate hanging in the balance. Lewis discovers he is a carrier, capable of spreading the infection, adding a layer of complexity and danger to his character. Through every trial, Lewis's character evolves, from a simple IT analyst to a battle-hardened survivor with a nuanced understanding of the risks and realities of a world overrun by the infected. His journey is not just about survival, it's a profound exploration of resilience, adaptability, and the human spirit's indefatigable will to preserve against all odds. In the grim and gritty world of Left 4 Dead, amidst the ceaseless dread and looming threats of the infected, Lewis emerges as a beacon of relentless optimism. His unwavering cheerfulness in the face of harrowing adversity is not just a mere personality trait, but a profound psychological armor, possibly a manifestation of what psychologists term reaction formation. This defense mechanism suggests that Lewis's persistent positivity may very well be an exaggerated facade, diametrically opposite to his true feelings of fear and despair, particularly striking given his prior life as a serious-minded and ambitious corporate executive. Before the outbreak, Lewis was known for his diligence and ambition, characteristics typically revered in the corporate realm. However, the infection turned his world upside down, forcing him into a reality where his optimism became both his shield and his weapon. Despite the dire circumstances, he consistently tries to uplift the spirits of his fellow survivors. His positivity is so pronounced that it occasionally earns him the ire of Francis, who, with a personality almost polar to Lewis's, often finds himself irritated by what he perceives as naive cheerfulness. Lewis's interactions with the other survivors paint a vivid picture of camaraderie shaped under pressure. With Bill, the relationship appears straightforward, rooted in the mutual respect forged in the fires of combat rather than in-depth personal connection. Lewis's lighthearted banter serves as a counterbalance to Bill's gruffer, more seasoned demeanor. For instance, when Bill complains about the pain of climbing stairs due to an old war injury, Lewis quips that it's good cardio, a moment of levity in their grim situation. Their bond deepens notably, evidenced in The Sacrifice comic, where Lewis not only teaches Bill to make pipe bombs, but also earns his respect through his combat initiative. When Lewis is gravely injured, Bill's decision not to leave him behind underscores a deep-seated comradeship, with Lewis viewed as one of his own. Lewis's dynamic with Francis showcases a stark contrast in their personalities. Francis's cynical, self-centered nature clashes with Lewis's effervescent optimism. This tension is palpable, with Francis often shutting down Lewis's buoyant remarks dismissively. However, the underlying respect that anchors their relationship becomes apparent in critical moments, such as when Francis or Lewis is incapacitated and the other rushes to their aid, putting their differences aside for survival. Zoe's interactions with Lewis bring a different flavor to the ensemble. Her playful teasing juxtaposes with his eternal optimism, creating moments of genuine emotional connection amidst the chaos. Zoe appreciates Lewis's upbeat demeanor, which provides a psychological respite for the group. Their bond deepens through the trials they face together, highlighted during the passing, where Zoe expresses concern for Lewis's injuries, showcasing a deep-seated mutual care and respect. Lewis's rapport with Coach reveals a mutual understanding and shared approach to the apocalypse. They both choose optimism as their psychological refuge. Their brief interactions are marked by mutual encouragement and a shared resolve to maintain morale, a crucial element in their continued survival and combat against the infected. One of the more cheerful dynamics unfolds between Lewis and Ellis, both sharing an upbeat approach to life despite their dire circumstances. Their optimism acts as a lifeline in the bleak settings they navigate. Lewis, with his characteristic positivity, finds amusement in Ellis's remarks and confidently assures him that he'll definitely make it to New Orleans. This interaction not only highlights their mutual encouragement, but also underscores a shared belief in the possibility of a future beyond the apocalypse. However, the scenario is starkly different when it comes to Nick. Known for his prickly and dismissive demeanor, Nick somehow manages to stir Lewis's ire, something seldom seen in the ever-optimistic survivor. Lewis's usual goodwill stretches thin around Nick, and he pointedly withholds his customary well wishes during their parting at the passing. Echoing Francis's sentiments, Lewis even remarks that Bill would have shot him, Nick, by now. Despite their strained relationship, when push comes to shove in the finale, Lewis doesn't let personal feelings hinder his actions. He provides Nick with crucial covering fire, demonstrating that in the heat of battle, survival trumps personal grievances. This complexity adds depth to Lewis's character, showing that even the most positive individuals have their limits. On the other end of the spectrum is his relationship with Rochelle, which is warmly instantaneous. When Rochelle sees Lewis wounded, her concern is palpable, and it's Lewis's vulnerable state that catalyzes her invitation for him and his group to join them on their journey to New Orleans. Her caring gesture shows how adversity can foster an immediate and profound connection, binding survivors together in their shared struggle against the odds. Lewis is an interesting character, to say the least. Despite the little context we have about him and the limited information Valve has provided about the character, he has been shown to have some complexity, or alternatively, a lot of inconsistencies. And to answer that, I would like to say that it's not like that. He's a pretty complete character. If we understand the problems he had in his job, the harassment in his preparation, we had said that he was a time bomb, but one that never exploded, because what seemed to be building up with the arrival of the disease eventually happened. When everyone got sick, he had the opportunity to at least kill all of his coworkers who had turned into zombies. If we add up the situations he experienced afterwards, we find a character who somehow managed to unload all of his problems and become much more pleasant. Not to mention that he met much better people. The reason he has so many problems with Francis is because Francis is the conflicted part of him, constantly reminding him of what he was and not what he wants to be, which causes him problems. Is Lewis a character to be mistrusted? Probably not. Not being burdened with social pressure and being in a much more pleasant space allows him to be more relaxed, and killing zombies all the time helps him to relieve stress. Lewis is a character who can be as complex as he is simple. And even though they don't give much context, he does become interesting. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave your comments. I hope you enjoyed plunging into Lewis's character file today.